Hello and welcome to this Bridge Technologies Academy video in which we're going to be looking at the new 6.2 software release. Now this software release is available for all BridgeTex compressed probes and the VBC. I'm going to be using as a reference the 6.2 release notes, and I'll link to that document below this video. I'll also link to all the user manuals for 6.2. Let's start with the VB330 and 220 software probes. Let's take a look at a 330 on the demo system. Transport stream recordings is probably the biggest addition to the 6.2 release. This feature is going to allow users to record up to 200 simultaneous transport streams and up to 10 gigabits per second for triggered short recordings. Here on the Dashboard tab, we can see the streams that have been configured to be recorded. Recordings can be manually triggered by an error condition, or set to trigger on time. Notice that on this probe, the recordings are stored on a mounted file system, which is usually additional disks installed on the server. This is going to allow the maximum amount of storage. The other options are RAM disks and the root file system, but both of these options will allow fewer recordings to be stored. The Recordings tab presents a table of all of the recordings that are currently on this particular probe. Editing allows me to add notes to any recording. We can protect individual recordings by clicking in the Protect box. Now this protection can be overridden in the Setup tab if the space allocated to the recording becomes rather full. And then we can download individual transport streams and the metadata files to my download folder on a PC for offline analysis. The reason column shows what caused the recording to be made, and as you can see, most of these are SCT35 events, but yes, here you can see an MTV scheduled recording. The Streams tab gives a list of all of the joined multicasts on this probe that are available for recording. You can see that it's possible to start a manual recording just from this tab. Just press the button. The Edit link allows different thresholds to be assigned to individual streams. Now on the Threshold tab, we can edit existing thresholds and add new ones in exactly the same way as thresholds elsewhere on the probe. The recording triggers are selected here and clicked and dragged to the right hand side. You can add as many triggers as you need to a threshold. At the top of this panel, there are some selectable parameters, including whether or not this is a scheduled recording and how much the pre-trigger buffer should be. This determines how much of the recording before the trigger event is retained. The Store in Timeline checkbox allows these recordings to be seen in the content timeline. Now, while we're talking about the timeline, let's take a quick look on how that looks. Notice that the recording marker coincides with the actual SCT35 splice point, which has also been recorded in the timeline. You can also just see the pre and post roll of the recording, as the recording marker is slightly longer than the actual SCT35 marker. In the Setup tab, we can see that switch for overriding individual protected recordings, and also here we can set up the maximum amount of disk space that can be used. As you can see on this particular probe, we've got 99% of 10 terabytes available. For longer manual recordings, these are limited by the speed of the persistent storage, in other words, the disks that you're using. If the speed is exceeded, you'll get a system alarm, and this will pause all the ongoing recordings at that time. And when the data is written to the disk, then these recordings will resume. There's been an addition to the already comprehensive SCT35 monitoring capability. In 6.2, you can now set the minimum and maximum pre-roll times for the SCT35 trigger. and this is set up in the SCT35 thresholds. Who remembers PCR histograms in version 5.6? Well, those of you that are missing them will be pleased to see them back now in 6.2. PTS analysis has also been added in 6.2. Histograms and PTS analysis for IPTV streams is fully available in version 6.2. I've included a couple of examples of PCR histograms later in the video. We've simplified the content service threshold. Here are some before and after screenshots. And while we're looking at thresholds, the ETR threshold has been tidied up. You can see that the checks each now have their own tabs. This makes it much easier to set ETR 290 and the other and interface checks. There have also been some minor changes to the media window user interface. Now, all of the features that we've just looked at apply to both the VB330 and the 220 software probes. Moving on to the embedded hardware probes, and this includes Nomad, we've added graphing of RF measurements for the VB252, 262 and 272 RF interface cards, as well as the Nomad itself. If your hardware probe has the Flash32 option installed, then you can record up to 8 days of graphs. Now, without the Flash32 option, about 2 days is possible. So let's look at the VB252 terrestrial interface as an example. We can see in various places the addition of these small little graphing icons. So wherever you see one of these icons, you can click to see a running graph. If you want to store these data points, then just click over to Setup and Measurement Log to select which RF interfaces to store. If we move across to the Data Storage tab, we can see that the Flash32 option is installed. I can download the CSV file, and as you can see in Excel, we have all of the data points recorded. We don't actually record the graphs, we just record the data points, and these of course allow you to reconstruct any graphs. As with the software probes, the hardware probes had PCR and PTS functionality, and the PCR histograms have been re-established in 6.2. Also in common with the software probes, the SCT35 pre-roll configuration has also been built into the SCT35 alarms. The improvements to the content service and ETR thresholds and the media window have also been implemented. If we move on to the VB330 embedded hardware probe, as with the software and other embedded probes, PCR histograms and PTS analysis for IPTV streams have been implemented. Similarly, the SCT35 pre-roll configuration is included, as well as the content and ETR thresholds. I think you can probably see a pattern emerging here. We're going for feature compatibility across all of the hardware and software probes. Now, there's been one significant addition to the VBC in 6.2, and this allows extended reports to support the ability to ignore class names when generating reports. This is important if you've used class names in the probe to further differentiate similar stream names. Well, I hope you found this brief look at the 6.2 software useful and interesting. If you want to use any of the features, then you can download and install the software in the usual manner. The latest 6.2 software release is now available on the British Technologies website. Thanks for watching.